you think that's a lot, 500 or 600 cuneiform signs to learn. The modern Chinese has thousands. I don't even dare guess how many thousands. Many of which, these 500 to 600 signs, are complicated. In the ancient Near East, only professional scribes commonly wrote, and the evidence they provide is usually most revealing for the upper classes, unless commoners got into a lawsuit. So most often it was the upper classes that were involved or written about in documents. And you had to be somewhere near the upper class to really get involved in most lawsuits. Rarely, once in a while, you have the lowliest peasant show up in court records. Okay, now about King Hammurabi, or Hammurabi, as you've heard it at times. The human being who appears most often is the king of Babylon. In Mesopotamian tradition, kingship was lowered from heaven by the gods as a guarantee of earthly order, and Hammurabi was one of the most successful rulers in the 3,000 years of independent Mesopotamian history. So the gods lowered kingship down out of the heavens as a gift to mankind to bring order out of chaos. The year lists of his long reign of 43 years. That's a long time. Amazing people lived that long, that he would be ruling for that long without being overthrown or die of disease or malnutrition, whatever. Amazing that he was on the throne for 43 years. Shows his unceasing concern for the walls, canals, temples, and divine statues of the land. His 22nd year was known as the Statue of Hammurabi, as king granting justice. So they built a big statue that year. They did probably lots of things, but that's what they named the year for. Even more significant was the name of his second year. He established justice in the country. So that was the name of the year, which probably refers to the custom that a new king granted pardon and remission of unpaid taxes. Never heard that before. Here's a picture of a stele, S-T-E-L-E, more than 7 feet high, on which the Code of Hammurabi was engraved. And it had a picture. They're too small to see with any use on the camera, and they're in dark stone. One of them is just the simplest little, it's a square of stone with the simplest little, just a head and a little thrashing machine that an ox would pull around in a circle to smash the barley on the floor. And the simpleness of that example and the much, much more complex example of, that is just like 5 or 6 little pictograms on a square of square of clay. And then here's done in stone, and on the bottom are thousands and thousands of characters, and there's a picture of Hammurabi receiving the twigs or whatever, some little damn thing, from the god of justice, Shamash. Anyways, so he reigned for a long time. Most famous of all of his lengthy code of laws, most famous of all is his lengthy code of laws, which was carved on a great diorite slab. Now, copies of this were made, and they were put in towns and temples and stuff. This stone, which was carted off by later Elamite conquerors to Susa, was excavated in 1901. The some 200 sections of this document divide men into 3 classes: the upper class, the commoners, and the slaves. Punishment for crimes were distinguished by class, to give one example. Now, people wonder what equality is, and they think that we should all have equal pay. Forget it. That's bullshit. Equality means if you break my back, or you break my head or something, doesn't matter if you're commoner or slave or what, or a king. If you commit murder, you go to jail. If you break the law, you're to answer for it, like Richard Nixon did. That's what equality before the law means. It doesn't mean equal pay. It doesn't mean we all have a house. It doesn't mean we all get a car. It just means that the law treats us all the same. So if you come to steal my car, it doesn't matter whether you're poor or not, we're going to put you in prison. You can't say, well, he had 5 cars and I didn't have any. That's no reason to steal. We were not equal. It guarantees equality in the Constitution. That's stupid. That's not. Look, here's an example of early inequality. This is what the Founding Fathers were against. Quote, if a noble has broken another noble's bone, they shall break his bone. If he has destroyed the eye of a commoner or has broken the bone of a commoner, that's not as bad as breaking a noble's bone. That's an insult. Noble breaking a noble's bone, break his bone. What if a noble breaks a commoner's bone? He shall pay 1 mina of silver. If he has destroyed the eye of a noble's slave, or broken the bone of a noble's slave, he shall pay 1/2 the slave's value. There you go. That is inequality before the law. Inequality before the law. Institutionalized. Okay, women, though still relatively independent, were viewed essentially as pieces of property. Christopher Hitchens says this in one of his speeches. He mentions the Old Testament, which says what you can and can't do this and that with your children and blah blah blah. Then it says your women and other animals, your wives and other animals, you can do this and that with them. They were just pieces of property, especially in regard to marriage rights. Still, masculine arrogance had not yet reached the level of some later laws of the 12th century BC, which ordered that, quote, here's what happened later on, when she deserves it, a man may pull out the hair of his wife, mutilate or twist her ears, with no liability attaching to him. Many of Hammurabi's laws related directly to economic life and regulated contracts, irrigation procedures, debts, get this, as far as debts go, state-set interest rates. 33.25% loans in grain. You loan me 10 bushels, I have to give you back 13 bushels, 13 1/3 bushels. 33% for grain and 20% for silver. You loan out silver, you get 20% extra back. So don't loan it out unless you're willing to take the state's, say so on the percentage. Then also they set maximum wages and the like, lots of other stuff like that. This is central planning. In ancient Babylon, the Code of Hammurabi has central planning in it. A centrally planned economy with set prices, set interest rates, set methods of, different stuff. Some of Hammurabi's legal provisions can be traced back to early Sumerian codes. For class division had produced exploitation by the 3rd millennium. Class division produced exploitation. And there was none of it before class division. No, class division was a recognition and an institutionalization of class. Class was already there. The exploitation was old. Class was just a formal recognition of it. It was there all along. Okay. Out of the murky distance of 4,000 years ago there rise outcries against the oppression and injustice, which sound like those of yesterday and today. The result was the first great effort to bring justice through law and thus to protect the rights of man. In the epilogue to his collection of legal precedents and rules, Hammurabi boasted. Here's what he boasted. I rooted out the enemy above and below. I made an end to war. Everybody's in favor of peace, even the greatest warriors. I promoted the welfare of the land. I made the people rest in friendly habitations. I did not let them have anyone to terrorize them. I have governed them in peace. I have sheltered them in my strength. He was a conqueror, however. Let's talk about that for a bit. Kings, however, are famous in history not solely because they care for the widow and orphan. Very often, their glory comes also from military valor and from victories over neighboring peoples. This aspect also goes far back in Mesopotamian history. Though its inhabitants shared an essentially common way of life, they often fell into conflict. Historical records show over 5 or 6 generations a debate about a small piece of territory on the frontier of 2 little states in the same branch of the Euphrates, going for 5 or 6 generations, fighting over a little teeny piece of territory on the frontier. Between 2 cities on a tributary of the Euphrates, a small side river. The first great imperialist in the world lived 600 years before Hammurabi. This was Sargon of Akkad. I've heard it Akkad, A-G-A-D-E or A-C-A-D-E, about 2371 BC. to 2316. He lived during the 2300s BC. According to legend, which may well be